The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I watched Melissa sleep, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like silk. 8 years of marriage, and she still took my breath away. At 35, I considered myself lucky. A successful software engineering career at Green Tech Solutions, a beautiful wife, and our dream home in Austin's Westlake neighborhood. Life had a pattern, a comfortable rhythm that I'd grown to appreciate. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. 6:30 a.m. Time for my morning routine. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake Melissa. She'd been working late again, coming home after midnight with tired eyes and stories about demanding clients. As a marketing coordinator at Prestige Communications, she dealt with high-maintenance accounts that kept irregular hours. I understood the pressure. The kitchen smelled like the Ethiopian coffee beans I'd ordered online, a small luxury that made early mornings bearable. While the coffee brewed, I checked the weather on my phone. Another perfect September day in Austin, ideal for my bike commute to work. David? Melissa's voice drifted from upstairs, groggy with sleep. Just making coffee, honey. Go back to sleep. She appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing my old UT t-shirt, her hair tousled in that way that made my heart skip. Even after 8 years, she could still do that to me. You're up early, she said, padding over to steal a sip from my mug. Same time as always. You just don't usually see it because you get home so late. A shadow crossed her face, barely perceptible. The Peterson account is killing me. Their product launch is next month and they keep changing everything. I wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her close. She smelled like the lavender body wash she'd started using recently. Different from her usual jasmine scent, but I didn't mind the change. Maybe this weekend we could do something together? It's been a while since we had a proper date. Maybe, she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I might have to work Saturday. Jason wants the whole team to brainstorm some new concepts. Jason Parker. Her boss. I'd met him once at a company Christmas party. Smooth, confident, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove a BMW. He was recently divorced, which Melissa had mentioned in passing. On Saturday? That seems excessive. She stepped out of my embrace, suddenly interested in checking her phone. It's just the nature of the business. You know how it is. I did know how demanding work could be. My own job required long hours sometimes, especially when we were pushing out new features for our environmental monitoring software. But something about her evasiveness bothered me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. I should get ready, I said, glancing at the clock. Kevin's picking me up at 8 for the mountain bike trail. Your brother's still single, right? She asked, seemingly out of nowhere. Yeah, why? Just wondering. He's what, 29? Good-looking guy. Surprised no one snatched him up. The comment struck me as odd, but I shrugged it off. He's focused on his IT consulting business. Says he doesn't have time for relationships. Melissa nodded absently, already scrolling through her phone. The easy intimacy of moments before had evaporated, replaced by the familiar distance that seemed to settle between us more often lately. After my shower, I found her in our walk-in closet, holding up 2 different blazers against herself in the mirror. Which one? She asked. The navy one. Brings out your eyes. She smiled, but it didn't reach those blue eyes I'd complimented. Thanks. I'll probably be late again tonight. Don't wait up. Another client dinner? Something like that. I wanted to ask more, but she was already moving away, creating space between us in ways both physical and emotional. When had we started communicating in these careful, measured exchanges instead of the easy conversation we used to share? 20 minutes later, I was adjusting my bike helmet in the garage when I heard the garage door opener activate. Melissa's white BMW X3 backed out of its spot, and I caught a glimpse of her through the windshield. She was already on her phone, animated in conversation with someone. At 7:15 in the morning. The thought nagged at me as I pedaled the 5-minute route to Green Tech Solutions. Our office occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse in East Austin, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures that the younger employees loved. I'd been here for 3 years, ever since the startup had grown large enough to need a dedicated software architect. "Morning, David," called Sarah from the reception desk. "Kevin stopped by looking for you about 10 minutes ago." "My brother? What did he want?" "Said something about rain gear for your bike ride. He left this." She handed me a small package. Inside was a new bike computer, one of those GPS units that tracked distance, speed, and routes. A note in Kevin's messy handwriting read, "Upgrade from your old one. This model has some interesting features. Call me." Kevin Mitchell was 6 years younger than me, but in many ways he was the tech genius in the family. While I worked on environmental software, he ran a cybersecurity consulting firm that catered to small businesses. His specialty was digital forensics, helping companies recover from data breaches and cyber attacks. I spent the morning debugging code for our latest monitoring system update, but my mind kept wandering. There was something different about Melissa lately, beyond just the late nights and work stress. She'd changed her perfume, started going to a new gym, and had become increasingly protective of her phone. When we first married, we'd shared everything: bank accounts, email passwords, even each other's phones when needed. Now she guarded her device like it contained state secrets. At lunch, I called Kevin. "Hey, thanks for the bike computer," I said. Very generous. "It's the latest model, has all kinds of tracking capabilities. You can monitor routes, set up geofences, even share your location with family members for safety." There was something in his tone that made me pause. "Kevin, is there something you want to tell me?" A beat of silence. "Maybe we should talk in person. You free after work?" "Sure. Everything okay?" "Just, we'll talk." The afternoon dragged. I found myself checking the clock every few minutes, wondering what Kevin wanted to discuss. At 5 o'clock, I was unlocking my bike when he appeared beside me in his black Toyota Tacoma. "Follow me," he said through the open window. "I know a place." We ended up at a coffee shop in South Austin, far enough from downtown that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. Kevin looked uncharacteristically serious as we settled into a corner booth. "This is about Melissa," he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. "What about her?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was Melissa's BMW parked in the lot of the Driscoll Hotel downtown. The timestamp showed 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, a day when she'd told me she was in back-to-back client meetings at the office. "How did you—" "I've been worried about you, David. You seem, I don't know, stressed lately, distracted. So I did a little digging. You've been following my wife." "Not following, observing. There's a difference." Kevin leaned forward. "Look, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But that photo was taken last Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Friday." The coffee tasted like ash in my mouth. "Maybe she was meeting clients there. The Driscoll has nice restaurants." "Maybe." Kevin's expression was sympathetic but skeptical. "David, when's the last time you two went somewhere together? Really together, not just running errands?" I tried to remember. Our anniversary dinner in June? That was 3 months ago. Before that, maybe our weekend trip to San Antonio in March. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "I installed a tracking app on your new bike computer," Kevin continued. "Not to spy on you, but to demonstrate how easy it is. If someone wanted to track a person's movements without their knowledge, they could do it pretty easily." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think someone might be tracking yours, or at least planning around your schedule." He slid another photo across the table. "This is Melissa's car leaving your neighborhood at 10:15 a.m. last Thursday. You'd already left for work, right?" I had. I remembered because I'd forgotten my laptop and had to go back. But Melissa was supposed to be at her office by 9 a.m. for a morning meeting. Kevin, this is circumstantial. I know. But David, as someone who makes a living catching people who lie about their digital activities, I'm telling you these patterns are concerning. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. The words that used to be considerate now felt like a slap. I showed Kevin the message. What time does she usually get home when she works late? Midnight, usually. Sometimes later. And where does she say she's working? The office, or client dinners. But even as I said it, I realized how vague her explanations had become. No specific restaurant names, no details about which clients or what they discussed. Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, about the size of a matchbox. This is a GPS tracker, magnetic mount, 2-week battery life, completely legal to put on your own vehicle. Kevin, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just giving you the tools to find out the truth. Whatever that truth might be. I stared at the device. Such a small thing, but it represented crossing a line I'd never imagined crossing. The line between trusting your spouse and verifying that trust. There's something else, Kevin said quietly. I ran a basic background check on her phone number. Just the metadata that's publicly available. She's been in contact with a number registered to Jason Parker. A lot of contact. Like every day for the past 3 months. The name hit me like a physical blow. Jason Parker. Her boss. The divorced one with the BMW and the expensive suits. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, I said, but the words sounded hollow. They work together. Yeah, they do. Kevin's tone was gentle but firm. David, I've seen this before with my clients. The changed behavior, the vague explanations, the increased secrecy. I hope I'm wrong, but he wasn't wrong. Deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. The signs had been there for months, but I'd been willfully blind to them. The emotional distance, the new clothes, the changed perfume, the phone calls that ended when I walked into the room. What would you do? I asked. If it were my wife, I'd want to know for sure, one way or the other. I picked up the GPS tracker, feeling its weight. Such a small device to potentially destroy an 8-year marriage. Or to save me from living a lie. If I do this, and I find out she's… I couldn't finish the sentence. Then you'll know. And knowing is better than wondering. On the drive home, I kept the tracker in my pocket, its weight seemingly magnified with each mile. Melissa's car was already gone when I arrived, another late night at the office. I sat in our empty house surrounded by 8 years of shared memories and wondered if any of it had been real. At 11:47 p.m., I heard the garage door open. I was in bed, pretending to read, when Melissa slipped in quietly. How was your day? She whispered, thinking I might be asleep. Good. Yours? Long, exhausting. The Peterson account is a nightmare. She disappeared into the bathroom and I heard the shower start. When she emerged, she was wearing a new nightgown I'd never seen before, black silk that complemented her figure perfectly. That's new, I said. This old thing? I've had it forever. But her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. She slipped into bed beside me, and for a moment, I thought she might initiate the intimacy that had been missing from our marriage for months. Instead, she turned away, murmuring something about being tired. I lay awake long after her breathing became deep and regular, the GPS tracker burning like a coal in my nightstand drawer where I'd hidden it. In the morning, I would have to make a choice. Trust the woman I'd loved for 8 years, or verify that my trust was justified. The next morning arrived with the harsh clarity that comes after a sleepless night. Melissa was already up, moving through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who had places to be and people to see. I'll be even later tonight, she said, applying lipstick in the bathroom mirror. Jason scheduled a dinner meeting with the Peterson people. On a Thursday night? They're flying back to Dallas tomorrow morning. It was the only time that worked. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something in her tone, too quick, too rehearsed, made my decision for me. After she left, I stood in the garage holding the GPS tracker. The underside of her BMW was easily accessible, and the device attached to the metal frame with a satisfying click. Just like that, I'd crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. At work, I tried to focus on code, but my mind kept drifting to the tracking app Kevin had shown me. By lunch, I'd checked it 6 times. Melissa's car was at her office building downtown, exactly where it should be. At 2:15 p.m., the car started moving. I watched the blue dot navigate through downtown Austin, heading not toward a restaurant or client office, but toward the Driscoll Hotel. The same hotel Kevin had photographed her visiting. My hands shook as I called the number for Prestige Communications. "This is David Williams. I was hoping to speak with my wife, Melissa Williams." "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but Melissa left for the day about 30 minutes ago. She said she had an off-site meeting." The blue dot had stopped moving. It was parked at the Driscoll Hotel, exactly where Kevin said it would be. I left work early, claiming a family emergency. The drive downtown felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I parked across the street from the hotel and waited. At 5:30 p.m. I saw them. Melissa emerged from the hotel's side entrance, and she wasn't alone. Jason Parker walked beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They were laughing about something, comfortable in a way that spoke of familiarity, of intimacy. They stopped beside a silver BMW, his car, not hers. He said something that made her throw her head back and laugh, a genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Then he kissed her. Not a peck on the cheek or a friendly kiss goodbye. A real kiss. The kind of kiss that leaves no doubt about the relationship between two people. I sat in my car, watching my wife kiss another man, and felt something die inside me. Not just my marriage, but my faith in my own judgment. How had I been so blind? They separated, and Melissa walked to her car while Jason headed to his. She checked her reflection in the side mirror, fixing her lipstick, and then drove away. Her phone rang almost immediately. I could see her answering through the windshield, probably calling to tell me she'd be late again. My phone buzzed with a text. "Dinner running long. Probably won't be home until after midnight. Sorry." The casual cruelty of the lie hit me harder than witnessing the kiss. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent mistake. This was calculated deception, practiced and refined over months. I drove home in a daze, my mind struggling to process what I'd seen. 8 years of marriage, and I'd never suspected she was capable of such elaborate deception. How long had this been going on? How many late nights at the office had actually been afternoons at the Driscoll Hotel? Kevin called as I pulled into my driveway. "You okay? You left work early." I saw them. The words came out flat, emotionless. "At the hotel. Together." A long pause. "I'm sorry, David. I really hoped I was wrong. What do I do now? What do you want to do?" I sat in my garage, staring at the empty space where Melissa's car should be, and realized I didn't know. The rational part of my mind said I should confront her, demand explanations, maybe suggest counseling. But a darker part, a part I didn't recognize, wanted something else entirely. "I want to know everything," I said finally. "How long this has been going on, whether she's planning to leave me, whether any of our marriage was real. That's going to require more than just GPS tracking." "What do you mean?" "David, I do digital forensics for a living. If you want to know everything, I can help you find everything. But once we go down that road, there's no going back. You'll know things you might not want to know." I thought about Melissa's laugh in the hotel parking lot, the easy intimacy between her and Jason, the casual way she'd lied to me via text message. "I need to know," I said. "All of it." "Okay, But we do this right. Legal, documented, usable if things go south. Can you meet me tomorrow? I'll show you what we're dealing with. That night, I lay in bed pretending to sleep when Melissa finally came home at 12:47 a.m. She moved quietly through the house, showering again before slipping into bed beside me. The scent of her new perfume filled the space between us, and I wondered if it was his favorite. Friday morning, Kevin and I met at his office, a converted warehouse space in East Austin that housed his cybersecurity firm. The main floor was all high-end computers and servers, but he led me to a smaller room in the back. Situation room, he said, gesturing to a conference table surrounded by whiteboards. This is where I help companies figure out how badly they've been compromised. The parallel wasn't lost on me. Before we start, I need you to understand something, Kevin said. What we're about to do is legal, but it's also irreversible. Once you know what we're going to find, you can't unknow it. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't just about catching Melissa cheating. This is about mapping the entire scope of her deception. How long it's been going on, what she's told him about you, what they're planning for the future. Are you prepared for that level of truth? I thought about the woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years, who'd promised to love and honor me until death do us part, who was now sneaking around hotel rooms with her boss. Yes, Kevin nodded and powered up his laptop. Let's start with the basics. You have a shared phone plan, right? Yeah, Verizon. Good. Do you have access to the online account? I did. We'd set it up together years ago, back when transparency between us was natural and easy. Kevin walked me through accessing the detailed call logs and text message metadata. I can't see the content of her messages, he explained, but I can see when they were sent, how long the calls lasted, and who she's been in contact with. The data painted a damning picture. Starting in late May, nearly 4 months ago, Melissa's communication with Jason Parker had increased dramatically. Daily calls, sometimes lasting an hour or more. Text message exchanges that went on throughout the day, even during times when she was supposedly focused on other clients. Now let's look at location data, Kevin said. Your phone plan includes family tracking. She agreed to it years ago for safety reasons. The location history showed a pattern that made my stomach churn. Regular visits to the Driscoll Hotel, always during business hours when I was at work. But there were other locations too. A cabin in Wimberley, an apartment complex in West Austin, restaurants I'd never heard of. She's been living a completely separate life, I said, staring at the data. It gets worse, Kevin said gently. Look at this. He pulled up her location history for our last anniversary in June. While I'd been at work, thinking about the romantic dinner I'd planned for that evening, she'd spent 3 hours at the Wimberley cabin with Jason. She came home that night and told me she loved me, I said, remembering how beautiful she'd looked in the dress I'd bought her, how grateful I'd felt to have her in my life. David, there's something else. The GPS tracker you put on her car yesterday? It recorded more than just her trip to the hotel. Kevin pulled up a new map showing the previous day's route. After leaving the hotel, Melissa hadn't gone back to work or come home. She'd driven to a residential complex in West Austin and stayed there for 2 hours. That's Jason's apartment, Kevin said. She went from the hotel to his place, while texting me that she was at a dinner meeting. Yeah. The scope of her deception was staggering. This wasn't an affair that had spiraled out of control. This was a calculated double life, maintained with the precision of a military operation. What else can we find out? I asked. Kevin hesitated. We could set up more comprehensive monitoring. Your home computer, for instance. If she's using it to communicate with him or to research other things. Other things? Divorce attorneys, asset protection, new apartments, the kind of research someone might do if they were planning to leave their husband. The thought hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Melissa cheating, but she might be preparing to abandon our marriage entirely, leaving me to discover her infidelity only after she'd positioned herself advantageously for a divorce. Do it, I said. All of it. Over the weekend, Kevin helped me install monitoring software on our home computer and set up additional tracking on Melissa's phone. The software was commercially available, the kind of thing parents use to monitor their children's internet activity. But in Kevin's hands, it became a comprehensive surveillance system. Melissa spent Saturday at the office, which according to the GPS tracker was actually the Wimberley cabin. She returned home that evening relaxed and happy, more affectionate than she'd been in months. "Good day at work?" I asked as she curled up beside me on the couch. "Productive," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "I think we're finally making progress on the Peterson account." The casual lie, delivered while she cuddled against me, felt like a knife between my ribs. Sunday brought revelations that made the affair seem almost quaint by comparison. While Melissa showered, I checked the monitoring software Kevin had installed. She'd spent an hour the previous evening researching divorce attorneys in Austin, specifically lawyers who specialized in high-asset divorces. She'd also visited a website called How to Protect Your Assets in a Texas Divorce and bookmarked an article titled Community Property Laws: What You Need to Know. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was preparing to divorce me and take as much of our shared wealth as possible. I called Kevin immediately. "She's planning to leave me," I said without preamble. "She's researching divorce lawyers." "What else did you find?" I read him the browser history. Real estate websites showing luxury apartments in Austin. Financial websites explaining how to hide assets offshore. Even a Google search for "how to prove husband is emotionally abusive" that made my blood run cold. "She's building a case," Kevin said grimly. "David, you need to talk to a lawyer, like immediately." It's Sunday. Then first thing Monday morning. This isn't just about an affair anymore. She's planning to destroy you financially and possibly legally. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day consulting with attorneys. The third one I visited, a sharp-eyed woman named Maria Rodriguez, listened to my story with growing concern. "Mr. Williams, if what you're telling me is accurate, your wife is several steps ahead of you in this process. The fact that she's researching asset protection suggests she's been planning this for a while. What does that mean for me?" In Texas, we have community property laws. Generally, assets acquired during marriage are split 50-50. But if she can prove fault on your part, abuse, abandonment, cruelty, she might be entitled to a larger share. I've never been abusive or cruel. Have you been emotionally distant, working long hours, failing to meet her emotional needs? Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Because a skilled attorney can frame those behaviors as emotional neglect or constructive abandonment. The pieces began falling into place. Melissa's increasing distance from me wasn't just about her affair. It was strategic. The more disconnected our marriage appeared, the stronger her case for fault-based divorce. What should I do? Document everything. And I mean everything. If she's having an affair, prove it. If she's planning to claim you were abusive or neglectful, we need evidence showing otherwise. Texas courts take adultery seriously. It can affect both property division and spousal support. I spent the rest of the week gathering evidence with Kevin's help. We documented every hotel visit, every lie about working late, every text message telling me she'd be home late while the GPS showed her at Jason's apartment. But it was Wednesday evening that provided the most damning evidence of all. Melissa had texted that she'd be working late on a crisis with the Peterson account. According to her location data, she was at the Wimberley cabin with Jason. I decided to see for myself. The cabin was isolated, set back from the road among tall pine trees. I parked down the road and approached on foot, my heart pounding. Through the living room window, I could see them clearly. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together. I could see legal documents spread across the coffee table, and Jason was pointing to specific sections while Melissa took notes. Her laptop was open to what looked like a real estate website. They were researching houses together, planning their future while she was still married to me. I activated the recording app on my phone and crept closer to the window. Their voices carried clearly in the still evening air. "Divorce should be finalized by Christmas," Jason was saying. "The lawyer thinks you have a strong case for emotional abandonment." "David's been so distant lately," Melissa replied, and I almost laughed at the irony. "He's completely checked out of our marriage, spends all his time at work or with his brother." "Perfect. That supports the narrative." "And you're sure about the financial accounts?" "I've been documenting everything. His 401k, the savings accounts, his stock options from the company. Community property law means I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage." "What about the house?" "Worth about $600,000. My lawyer thinks I can get it in the settlement, especially if we can prove David was emotionally abusive." My hands shook as I held the phone, recording every word. They weren't just planning to end my marriage, they were planning to destroy me financially and reputationally. "When will you tell him?" Jason asked. "After the holidays. I want to get through Christmas first, maybe take one last vacation on his dime." She laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "He's so oblivious. I could probably keep this going for months if I wanted to." "Why wait? We could be living together by New Year's." "Because timing matters. The longer I can document his emotional distance and neglect, the stronger my case becomes. My lawyer wants at least 6 months of documented behavior before we file." I'd heard enough. I backed away from the cabin, my mind reeling. This wasn't just an affair that had gotten out of hand. This was a calculated plot to destroy my life, orchestrated by the woman I'd loved and trusted for 8 years. By the time I got home, my shock had crystallized into something colder and more dangerous: determination. If Melissa wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd play to win. Thursday morning, I met with Rodriguez again, this time armed with recordings, photographs, and documented evidence of Melissa's deception. "This is remarkable documentation," Rodriguez said, reviewing the materials. "Mr. Williams, your wife has made a serious tactical error. By planning her divorce strategy while still married and having an affair, she's handed us everything we need to not only defend against her accusations but to turn the tables entirely." "What do you mean?" "Texas is a fault-based divorce state. Adultery is grounds for an unequal division of community property. Instead of losing half your assets, you could potentially keep most of them. And if we can prove she was planning to defraud you financially..." The implications were staggering. Not only could I protect my assets, but I could potentially turn Melissa's own strategy against her. "What about her claims of emotional abuse?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Kind of hard to claim your husband was emotionally abusive when you were secretly planning to leave him for another man. Her own words on that recording show she was the one who withdrew from the marriage, not you." Over the next 2 weeks, Kevin and I expanded our surveillance operation. We documented every lie, every secret meeting, every moment Melissa spent with Jason while claiming to be working. The evidence was overwhelming. But it was the discovery of her email communications that provided the final pieces of the puzzle. "She's been using your home computer to email with her divorce attorney," Kevin told me on a Friday evening, "and she's been copying all your financial documents to a cloud storage account." "What kind of documents?" "Everything. Bank statements, investment account records, your employment contract, even your tax returns from the past 5 years. She's been planning this for months, David. Maybe longer." The monitoring software had captured screenshots of her email exchanges with her attorney, a man named Richard Blackwood, who specialized in high-conflict divorces. The emails revealed the full scope of her strategy. She was planning to claim I'd been emotionally and financially abusive, that I'd isolated her from friends and family, and that I'd threatened her when she tried to address problems in our marriage. None of it was true, but with the right presentation, it might have been believable. More disturbing were her emails to Jason, which revealed the personal side of her betrayal. She wrote about how much she loved him, how she couldn't wait to start their life together, and how she viewed our marriage as a prison she needed to escape. "I can't believe I wasted 8 years on David," one email read. "He's such a boring, predictable man. No ambition, no passion. You've shown me what I've been missing." Another. "David suspects nothing. He's so trusting, it's almost pathetic. He actually thanked me for working so hard to support our future. If only he knew I was planning a future without him." The cruelty of her words cut deeper than the physical betrayal. This wasn't just about sex or even love. She held me in complete contempt, viewed me as an obstacle to her happiness rather than as a human being worthy of basic respect. But the most damaging email was one she'd sent to her attorney the previous week. "I need to accelerate the timeline. David's been asking more questions lately, and I'm worried he might be getting suspicious. How quickly can we move on the abuse allegations? I've been documenting instances of emotional distance and neglect, but I might need to manufacture something more concrete." Manufacture. She was planning to fabricate evidence of abuse to strengthen her divorce case. "This changes everything," Rodriguez said when I showed her the emails. "She's not just committing adultery, she's planning to commit perjury and possibly fraud. This level of premeditation shows clear intent to defraud you of marital assets." What does that mean? It means we don't just defend against her divorce petition. We go on the offensive. Adultery, fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury. We can not only protect your assets, but potentially seek damages for her misconduct. The thought of turning the tables on Melissa was intoxicating, but I needed to be smart about it. If I confronted her now, she might accelerate her timeline or destroy evidence. Better to let her continue thinking she had the upper hand while I prepared my counterattack. "How long do I have?" I asked Rodriguez. Based on her emails, she's planning to file for divorce in January. That gives us about 6 weeks to prepare our case and gather any additional evidence we might need. What kind of additional evidence? Financial records showing she's been stealing documents. More recordings of her and Jason discussing their plans. Maybe evidence that she's already moving assets or preparing to leave. Over the Thanksgiving weekend, while Melissa played the role of loving wife in front of my family, I documented everything. The contrast between her public performance and her private betrayal was staggering. At my parents' house, she was charming and affectionate, telling my mother how grateful she was for our marriage and how much she loved being part of the family. She even helped my mother cook, sharing stories about our early dating years and laughing about my quirks. "You're so lucky to have David," she told my sister-in-law, Sarah. "He's such a good man. Honest, loyal, dependable. I thank God every day that I found him." The performance was so convincing that I almost questioned my own evidence. Could the woman sitting beside me, holding my hand and calling me her rock, really be the same person who'd been systematically planning my destruction for months? But that night, as we lay in the guest room at my parents' house, she texted Jason, "Missing you so much. Can't wait for this charade to be over. Only a few more weeks and we can stop pretending." The answer was yes. She absolutely was that same person. December brought the final phase of evidence gathering. Kevin had upgraded our surveillance system to include audio recording in our house, legal in Texas as long as one party consented, which I obviously did. The recordings revealed conversations between Melissa and Jason that made her emails seem tame by comparison. They discussed selling our house and moving to Colorado, where Jason had been offered a job with a larger marketing firm. They talked about the honeymoon they'd take with David's money and the wedding they'd have once her divorce was finalized. But the most damaging conversation happened on December 15th, when Jason came to our house while I was supposedly at work. I'd actually taken the day off and was monitoring the situation from Kevin's office. "This place gives me the creeps," Jason said, his voice clearly audible through the hidden microphones Kevin had installed. "Knowing he sleeps here, thinking you're his loving wife." "Not much longer," Melissa replied. "My lawyer says we can file right after New Year's." With all the evidence I've gathered about his emotional abuse, I should get the house and most of the assets. What evidence? You said yourself he's never actually abused you. He doesn't have to. Emotional neglect is just as damaging as physical abuse, legally speaking. The fact that he works long hours, doesn't share his feelings, and has been distant lately, it all adds up to a pattern of emotional abandonment. But that's not really abuse, is it? That's just being a typical husband. Melissa laughed. That's the beauty of it. Most men are emotionally absent to some degree. It's easy to frame normal male behavior as psychological abuse if you know how to present it. What about the recordings and photos you mentioned? I've been staging some situations, making it look like he's controlling or paranoid. Last week, I told my attorney that David checks my phone and monitors my activities. It's completely false, but it supports the narrative of a controlling, abusive husband. My hands clenched into fists as I listened to her describe how she'd been manipulating the truth to destroy my reputation. Not only was she stealing my assets, she was actively trying to frame me as an abuser. Are you sure this is legal? Jason asked. Legal enough. It's my word against his. And who's going to believe that sweet, innocent Melissa Williams would lie about being abused? I've already started telling friends and family that David has been difficult lately, planting seeds of doubt about his character. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from how they'd split my retirement accounts to where they'd live after the divorce. They discussed my job, my family, even my hobbies, all with the casual contempt of people dividing up the belongings of someone they considered beneath their notice. When it was over, I sat in Kevin's office feeling like I'd been hollowed out. 8 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. With my wife and her lover treating me like an obstacle to be removed rather than a human being deserving basic dignity. You okay? Kevin asked. No, but I will be. What's the plan? I thought about Rodriguez's advice, about the evidence we'd gathered, about the way Melissa had systematically planned my destruction while smiling to my face every morning. We're going to give her exactly what she deserves. Christmas morning arrived with a fresh layer of deception. Melissa had bought me expensive gifts, a new watch, tickets to a concert I'd mentioned wanting to see, a leather jacket that must have cost $500. I love you so much, she said, kissing me as I opened the last present. I know I've been working too much lately, but that's going to change. I want to focus more on us this year. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. The performance was flawless, complete with tears in her eyes as she talked about how grateful she was for our marriage. I have something for you too, I said, handing her a small wrapped box. Inside was a necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. She put it on immediately, admiring herself in the mirror. It's beautiful, David. Thank you. What she didn't know was that the pendant contained a small GPS tracker and audio recording device, the latest in surveillance technology that Kevin had acquired through his security firm. From now on, I'd know exactly where she went and who she talked to. I love you too, I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it. Not the lying, scheming woman in front of me, but the memory of who she used to be, or who I'd thought she was. The week between Christmas and New Year's was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Melissa ramped up her affectionate behavior, perhaps wanting to create one last period of marital bliss before she destroyed everything. She cooked my favorite meals, initiated physical intimacy for the first time in months, and talked constantly about our future together. I've been thinking we should take a vacation, she said on December 30th as we sat on the couch watching a movie. Maybe Hawaii? We could use some time to reconnect. That sounds wonderful, I replied, knowing she was probably planning to file for divorce before any vacation could happen. And maybe when we get back we could start trying for a baby. The suggestion was so absurd, given what I knew about her plans, that I almost laughed. Instead, I squeezed her hand and told her it was something to consider. That night, She made love to me with a passion that had been absent from our marriage for months. If I hadn't known about Jason, about the divorce plans, about her complete contempt for me, I might have thought we were experiencing a genuine reconciliation. Instead, I lay awake afterward wondering if she was thinking about him while touching me, if every kiss and caress was part of her final performance before she tried to destroy my life. January the 2nd brought the call I'd been expecting. David, this is Maria Rodriguez. Melissa's attorney just served me with divorce papers. She's filed, and it's exactly as ugly as we expected. The petition accused me of emotional abuse, financial control, and psychological manipulation. According to Melissa's filing, I had systematically isolated her from friends and family, monitored her activities, and created a hostile home environment through my controlling and paranoid behavior. She was seeking the house, half of all financial accounts, spousal support, and her attorney's fees. The filing painted a picture of an innocent woman finally escaping from an abusive marriage. When do we respond? I asked. We have 30 days, but I want to file our countersuit within the week. David, based on the evidence you've provided, this is going to be one of the most one-sided divorce cases I've ever handled. What do you mean? She's accused you of the exact behavior she's been engaging in: monitoring, controlling, psychological manipulation. Her own emails and recordings prove she's been doing all of these things to you. It's almost like she's confessing. Rodriguez was right. In trying to frame me for abusive behavior, Melissa had perfectly described her own actions. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. There's something else, Rodriguez continued. I've been researching her attorney, Richard Blackwood. He's been sanctioned twice for helping clients fabricate evidence in divorce cases. The fact that she chose him suggests she's planning to do something unethical. More unethical than what she's already done? Based on the pattern of her behavior and her choice of counsel, I think she's planning to escalate. False accusations, maybe even a restraining order based on fabricated incidents. You need to be very careful over the next few weeks. Rodriguez was right to be concerned. That evening, Melissa came home late and immediately started an argument over something trivial. I'd forgotten to put the dishes in the dishwasher. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, her voice rising. You're so inconsiderate. You expect me to clean up after you like I'm your maid. Melissa, I worked late and forgot. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's indicative of how you see me, as someone who exists to serve you. She was practically shouting now, which was completely out of character for her usual passive-aggressive style. Then I noticed her phone on the counter, and I realized what was happening. She was recording our conversation, trying to provoke me into an angry response she could use as evidence of my abusive behavior. You're right, I said calmly. I should have cleaned up. I'll do better. Don't patronize me, she snapped. That's another one of your control tactics, acting like the reasonable one while making me feel crazy. She continued the tirade for another 10 minutes, saying increasingly outrageous things in an obvious attempt to make me lose my temper. I responded to everything with calm agreement and apologies, never raising my voice or saying anything that could be construed as threatening. Finally, she gave up and stormed out of the room. I heard her on the phone immediately afterward, probably with Blackwood, explaining that she'd tried to provoke an incident but I hadn't taken the bait. The next few days followed the same pattern. Melissa would try to start arguments, make unreasonable demands, or create situations where a normal person might lose their temper. I responded to everything with exaggerated calm and understanding, turning each attempted provocation into evidence of my own reasonableness. Meanwhile, the GPS tracker in her necklace and the monitoring software on our computer continued to document her real activities. She was spending every free moment with Jason, often at his apartment, discussing their plans for after the divorce. He's not reacting the way we expected, she told Jason during one recorded conversation. My attorney said most men get angry when served with divorce papers, but David's being weird about it. Too calm. Maybe he doesn't care as much as you thought, Jason replied. Maybe he's actually relieved. No, that's not it. There's something different about him. Like he knows something. She was right to be suspicious, but it was too late. We'd already gathered enough evidence to destroy her case and file criminal charges for fraud and perjury. On January 10th, Rodriguez and I met to finalize our countersuit and prepare for the battle ahead. David, I have to ask you one more time, she said. Are you sure you want to go nuclear with this? What we're planning will not only win your divorce case, it will likely destroy Melissa financially and professionally, maybe even criminally. I thought about the past 6 months. The lies, the betrayal, the calculated cruelty of her plans, the way she'd held me while planning my destruction, the contempt in her voice when she talked about our marriage. She made her choice, I said. Now she gets to live with the consequences. All right then, let's give her a divorce she'll never forget. Our countersuit was filed on January 12th, and it was a masterpiece of legal warfare. We accused Melissa of adultery, fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury, theft of marital assets, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We included photographic evidence, audio recordings, email transcripts, and financial documents showing the scope of her deception. But the real bombshell was our motion for emergency relief. We asked the court to freeze all marital assets, award me temporary exclusive use of the house, and order Melissa to return all stolen financial documents. Rodriguez served the papers at Melissa's office, ensuring maximum professional embarrassment. By the end of the day, everyone at Prestige Communications knew that sweet, innocent Melissa Williams was involved in a scandalous divorce involving adultery and fraud. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Melissa called me that evening, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you? Those papers. Everyone at work saw them. They know everything. Know about what, Melissa? Your affair with Jason? Your plan to falsely accuse me of abuse? Your theft of my financial records? The silence on the other end told me she was realizing the scope of what I knew. David, I can explain. No need. It's all documented. Every hotel visit, every lie, every email to your attorney about how to destroy me. You wanted to play games, Melissa. Congratulations. You're about to find out what happens when you play with someone better at it than you are. She hung up without another word. The next morning brought news that Jason Parker had been fired from Prestige Communications. The company had a strict policy against relationships between supervisors and subordinates, and the evidence of their affair was now part of the public record. More importantly, Jason's termination was for cause, meaning he wouldn't receive severance pay or unemployment benefits. The financial pressure was immediate and devastating to their plans. Melissa's own position at the company became untenable. While she wasn't technically fired, the hostile work environment created by her colleagues' knowledge of the affair made it impossible for her to function effectively. She resigned on January 15th. Within a week of filing our countersuit, both Melissa and Jason had lost their jobs and their primary sources of income. The financial pressure of mounting legal bills and no employment income began taking its toll immediately. Rodriguez's strategy was working perfectly. By documenting everything and responding with overwhelming legal force, we'd turned Melissa's own tactics against her. Instead of being painted as an abuser, I was now the wronged husband fighting back against a calculating adulteress. The court hearings began in February, and they were a masterclass in legal humiliation. Melissa's attorney, Richard Blackwood, had built his case around her claims of emotional abuse and neglect. But when Rodriguez presented our evidence, audio recordings of Melissa and Jason planning my destruction, emails detailing her fraud, photographs of their hotel meetings, his entire strategy collapsed. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Coleman, was not impressed with Melissa's deception. "Mrs. Williams," she said during one hearing, "you've presented this court with claims of emotional abuse while the evidence shows you were systematically deceiving your husband and planning to defraud him of marital assets. Your credibility is severely compromised. Blackwood tried to argue that Melissa's affair was the result of my emotional neglect, that she'd been driven to adultery by my abusive behavior. But when Rodriguez played the recording of Melissa laughing about how oblivious I was and how she could keep this going for months, even he seemed to realize his case was hopeless. The final blow came when we presented evidence that Melissa had been copying my financial documents to build her divorce strategy. The judge ruled that this constituted theft of marital assets and awarded me exclusive control of all bank accounts and investments. Furthermore, Judge Coleman said, given the evidence of planned perjury and fraud, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. Melissa's face went white. Not only was she losing the divorce case, she was facing potential criminal charges. By March, the financial pressure had completely destroyed Melissa and Jason's relationship. Without jobs or income, they couldn't afford their own apartments and were forced to live with Jason's elderly mother in a cramped two-bedroom house in East Austin. The stress of their situation, combined with the mounting legal bills and the possibility of criminal charges, turned their grand romance into a bitter battle for survival. Kevin's surveillance equipment, still active in Melissa's necklace, captured their arguments as their fairy tale future crumbled into recriminations and blame. "This is all your fault," Melissa screamed at Jason during one particularly vicious fight. "You said you'd take care of everything. You said David was too trusting to fight back. I never told you to steal his financial documents or plan to frame him for abuse," Jason shot back. "That was your brilliant idea. I did it for us, for our future." "What future? We're both unemployed, living in my mother's house, facing criminal charges." "Some future." The recording equipment captured everything. Their regrets about the affair, their blame of each other for the consequences, their growing hatred for the situation they'd created. By April, their relationship was over. Jason kicked Melissa out of his mother's house, telling her he couldn't afford to support her anymore. She moved into a cheap apartment complex on the east side of town, working part-time at a retail store to pay rent. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings had become a formality. With overwhelming evidence of adultery and fraud, Judge Coleman awarded me virtually everything. I kept the house, all retirement accounts, most of the savings, and even Melissa's car, since I'd been making the payments. Melissa was ordered to pay my legal fees and received no spousal support. In Texas, adultery can completely bar a spouse from receiving alimony, and her case was textbook material for such a denial. The final divorce decree was granted on May 15th, exactly 4 months after she'd filed her original petition. What was supposed to be her victory had become her complete destruction. But the story didn't end there. In June, the district attorney's office filed criminal charges against Melissa for fraud and conspiracy to commit perjury. The evidence we'd gathered was more than sufficient to prove she'd intentionally planned to deceive the court and defraud me of marital assets. Richard Blackwood, her attorney, was also investigated for his role in helping her fabricate evidence. While he avoided criminal charges, he received another sanctions from the state bar and eventually lost his license to practice law. Melissa's criminal trial began in August. By then, she was represented by a public defender, having spent all her money on the divorce proceedings. She looked nothing like the confident, beautiful woman who'd shared my bed a year earlier. The stress had aged her, and the cheap clothes she could now afford highlighted how far she'd fallen. The trial lasted 3 days. Rodriguez testified about the evidence we'd discovered. Kevin explained the surveillance operation that had documented Melissa's deception, and I took the stand to describe the emotional impact of her betrayal. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, suspended to probation contingent on her paying restitution for the legal fees she'd caused me to incur. Standing in that courtroom, watching the woman who'd planned my destruction being led away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Melissa had thrown away an 8-year marriage, her career, her financial security, and her freedom for an affair that lasted less than 6 months. She'd lost everything she'd tried to steal from me, and more. As I walked out of the courthouse, Rodriguez put a hand on my shoulder. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like justice has been served," I said. And I meant it. The house felt different when I returned home that evening. The same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, but somehow lighter. The oppressive weight of deception that had hung over everything was finally gone. I'd kept some of our wedding photos, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of how thoroughly someone can deceive you if you let trust override observation. The smiling couple in those pictures had been living a lie, but only one of us had known it. Kevin stopped by later that evening, carrying a bottle of bourbon. "Congratulations," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "You won." Did I? Sometimes it feels like everybody lost. Melissa lost because she made choices that led to consequences. You won because you refused to let her destroy you. He raised his glass. To the truth, and to the fact that it always comes out eventually. We drank in comfortable silence, 2 brothers who'd been through a war and survived. 6 months later, I sold the house. Too many memories, both good and bad. I bought a smaller place in South Austin, closer to work, and started the process of rebuilding my life. The dating apps were awkward at first. How do you explain to someone new that your ex-wife is a convicted felon who tried to frame you for abuse? But eventually, I met Sarah, a teacher who appreciated honesty and had her own stories about relationships gone wrong. "Trust takes time," she said over dinner one evening, "but it's still worth the risk." She was right. Not everyone is Melissa. Not every smile hides a betrayal. Not every "I love you" is a lie designed to make the eventual destruction more painful. A year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jason at a grocery store. He looked terrible, thin, tired, wearing clothes that had seen better days. He started to say something when he saw me, then thought better of it and hurried away. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd never found another job in marketing. The scandal had followed him, and his termination for cause made him unemployable in his field. He was working construction now, living paycheck to paycheck. Melissa served 18 months of probation before violating the terms by failing to make her restitution payments. She spent the final 6 months of her sentence in county jail. When she was released, she'd lost her apartment and had to move back in with her parents in Dallas. I felt no satisfaction in their misery. They'd made their choices and faced the consequences. My role in their story was over. 2 years after everything ended, Sarah and I were planning our own wedding. She'd moved into my new house, and we were building something real together. Something based on actual trust and mutual respect, rather than the illusion I'd mistaken for love with Melissa. "Do you ever regret how things went down?" Sarah asked one evening as we planned our honeymoon. "Which part? The investigation? The legal war? The criminal charges?" "All of it. The whole nuclear option approach." I thought about the question seriously. Could I have handled things differently? Could I have simply confronted Melissa, demanded the truth, tried to work things out? "No," I said finally. She wasn't cheating because our marriage was broken. She was cheating because she decided I wasn't worthy of her anymore, and she was planning to destroy me financially and legally in the process. Someone who does that doesn't deserve mercy or a second chance. But don't you think people can change? Don't you think she might have realized her mistake and tried to make things right? I showed Sarah the last email Melissa had sent Jason before everything fell apart. It was dated 3 days before I confronted her, long after her affair was well established and her divorce plans were in motion. "I can't wait to see David's face when he realizes I'm leaving him," the email read. "He probably thinks he's going to grow old with me, that I'll always be his devoted little wife. The shock when he finds out the truth is going to be delicious." Sarah read the email twice, her expression growing darker with each word. "Okay," she said finally. I take it back. She got exactly what she deserved. That email captured the essential truth about Melissa that I'd been too trusting to see until it was almost too late. She didn't just want to leave me, she wanted to hurt me. The deception wasn't just a means to an end, it was entertainment for her. People like that don't change. They don't suddenly develop empathy or conscience. They just get better at hiding their true nature until the next opportunity for betrayal presents itself. 3 years later, I got a letter from Melissa. It was forwarded through Rodriguez's office, since Melissa didn't have my current address. "David," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know how sorry I am for everything that happened. I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing in my life. I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I hope someday you can understand that I was lost and made terrible choices. I pray that you found happiness without me." I showed the letter to Sarah, who read it with a skeptical expression. "Think she means it?" she asked. "Probably. Now that she's lost everything and realizes the consequences of her actions. But the time for apologies was before she planned my destruction, not after she got caught." I threw the letter away without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay burned. Sarah and I married that spring in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends who knew our real story. Kevin was my best man, and in his toast, he said something that captured the entire experience perfectly. "David learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that could happen to you." Melissa's betrayal hurt him, but it also freed him to find something real. He was right. If Melissa hadn't shown me her true nature, I might have spent the rest of my life married to someone who held me in contempt. I might never have learned to pay attention to the signs of deception or developed the strength to fight back when someone tried to destroy me. The duplicate keys that started it all were sitting in my desk drawer at home, a reminder of how small details can unravel the biggest lies. I'd kept them not as a souvenir of my failed marriage, but as a symbol of the importance of paying attention to the world around you. Trust, but verify. It was a lesson I'd learned the hard way, but one that had ultimately saved my life. As Sarah and I danced at our wedding reception, I looked around at the faces of people who genuinely cared about us, who'd supported us through the dark times and celebrated with us in the light. This was what real love looked like. Honest, supportive, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than calculated deception. Melissa had wanted to destroy me, but in the end, she'd only destroyed herself. I'd not only survived her betrayal, I'd thrived in spite of it. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And sometimes, when someone tries to destroy your life, the best response is to make them face the consequences of their choices. I never saw Melissa again, and I never wanted to. That chapter of my life was closed, filed away with the divorce papers and court records as a reminder that not everyone who says they love you actually means it. But I'd learned to tell the difference. And that knowledge, hard-won as it was, had given me something far more valuable than the marriage I'd lost: the ability to recognize and appreciate the real thing when I found it. The duplicate keys were a symbol of deception, but they'd also been the key to my freedom. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you really have. And sometimes, what you really have is the strength to start over and build something better. 5 years after everything ended, I was promoted to Chief Technology Officer at Green Tech Solutions. Sarah and I had bought a bigger house and were expecting our first child. Kevin had expanded his security firm and was dating a wonderful woman who appreciated his protective instincts. Life was good. Better than good. It was real. I thought about Melissa sometimes, wondering if she'd learned anything from the destruction she'd caused, or if she was somewhere planning her next deception. But those thoughts were brief and analytical rather than emotional. She was a case study now, not a source of pain. The scar tissue from her betrayal had made me stronger, more observant, better able to appreciate genuine love when I found it. In trying to destroy me, she'd ultimately made me better. And that, perhaps, was the greatest irony of all. Melissa's final gift to me wasn't the love she'd pretended to feel, but the wisdom that came from surviving her hatred. The duplicate keys were still in my desk drawer, but they no longer represented deception and betrayal. They represented the moment I'd started paying attention, the beginning of the investigation that had saved my life. Sometimes the smallest details reveal the biggest truths. And sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the best thing you can do is believe them and act accordingly. I'd learned both lessons well, and I'd never forget them. The story of Melissa and her duplicate keys had ended, but my real story, the one built on truth and genuine love, was just beginning. And that made all the pain worthwhile.